Thank you for being here. It means all the support for what we do. And tonight is a very special event that has been conceived in partnership with Wendy Yao of Ooga Booga. We have, yeah, Wendy. Thank you, Wendy. We have what's called a bookshelf residency, and our current resident is Ooga Booga. And I can't tell you how happy everybody is because Wendy is a 20-year history in this town and has supported many artists over those years. And what we have, in addition to the shelves that are curated by Wendy with the things that are changing because people are buying, we have a little annex exhibition here. And this annex is this little hug of a space. And it's been changing. We had first Lauren Graycar with Kima books, and now we have Maggie Lee. And Maggie Lee is an artist, multidisciplinary, who's worked with, has a long history with Wendy and Ooga Booga. And so that's actually a bit of an homage to the work they've done together. It's called Ooga Boogie Cha-Cha-Cha. So that's up for a while. And this all fits very nicely in spirit and energy with our main exhibition, which is Scratching at the Moon. It is co-curated by Anna Sue Hoy and our Good Works Executive Director, Ann Elgood. And the good news is we're extending this exhibition through July 28th. So it's been getting a lot of lovely attention. Thank you. On behalf of all of us, thank you. We're going to have some more programs, lots of really incisive tours and talks and performances. So please follow us on Instagram or sign up for our newsletter and be here again and again. So tonight, Miyoko Ito, Heart of Hearts, my remarks are now going to be very brief because we want to get on with this wonderful program that was done, introduced to me as an idea by Wendy. And then I met Matt Connors of Pre-Echo Press. And then I met Jordan Stein, who both of them have been so invested in the work of this under-recognized little known, I didn't know this artist. People are discovering Miyoko Ito, and in the words of like Pearl Hsiung, like my life was changed. And or another one's like my Namira, who couldn't be one of our speakers, like it just blew my mind. And people are buying the books and giving them as gifts. We have a number of books for sale, so please, if you want to have an heirloom in your life with Miyoko Ito, it's a really great service that they created this edition for us all to know about this artist and to enjoy these works that they so worked hard to put together over several years and make this publication. Yeah, this is a wonderful turnout. I don't even know if we have enough books for everybody, but please, it's on order soon. There'll be more. This is its second printing. That's how amazing this is. So the flow is that I am going to just step off the stage and give it to Jordan to start his presentation. And then Jordan will bring up Matt, and then we'll have a nice flow of reflections on the work of specific paintings by this artist. Jordan Stein is a curator and writer and has done this. I mean, I don't know Jordan Stein at length, so there's a bio here that tells you, and trust us, we have amazing people tonight, but Jordan has done all this work around Miyoko Ito in bringing the work in high visibility to many people through exhibitions in the past few years. So we're really honored to have this event tonight to learn together a little more about this artist. So Jordan, why don't you come up here?
Thanks, Oscar. Thanks, everybody, for coming. It's so nice to see so many friends here. I'll make sure this is okay. Thanks to Wendy and Oscar and everyone at the ICA. It's really, really nice to be in this building and in Los Angeles. And from what I understand, this is the first exhibition exclusively of Asian American artists in Los Angeles, which is pretty amazing and perfect backdrop to be doing this presentation today of Miyoko's work. And it's a treat that you're all here. I mean, in a lot of ways, this project is a fantasy, you know. I just never in a million years thought that we get to make a book that turned out so beautiful, and that people would find it, and people would fill these seats. So thanks for coming. We're going to sort of follow a format that we've done in various other cities. Matt Connors, artist and publisher of Pre-Echo Press, designed, had an idea, is another way to say it, to invite a number of local artists, in some case artists and writers, to choose a painting of Ito's from the book and to have it projected behind them, and then talk for 5 or 10 minutes about that work. And it's been a really, really nice way to go deeper with Miyoko's practice through the eyes and minds of working, living artists. Ito died in 1983, so I certainly never had the chance to meet her. So I'll give a talk here, maybe 20 minutes or so, about Ito's life and work, but primarily about the process of making the book. I mean, it's not an art talk per se. It was such a journey just in sort of realizing this publication. So I'll talk about how I came to the work and how Matt and I sort of found each other, and how this whole thing happened. And then Pearl Hsiung, Hanna Hur, Rebecca Morris, Lesley Vance, and Matt Connors will speak, all totally brilliant people and artists. So thanks for being here and doing this. I moved to Chicago in 2015 for a job, for a one-year curatorial position at a place called the Renaissance Society at the University of Chicago, which is arguably the oldest contemporary art museum in the United States. And it's a Kunsthalle. It's like here, there's no permanent collection. And really dynamic, amazing institution that largely is responsible for commissioning new work by living artists. And I was doing a lot of archival work at the time, and they hired me to make an archival exhibition celebrating 100 years of their existence. So for someone who's interested in putting their nose into archival boxes, it was a total dream, because I came to know largely about a history of artwork in the United States and beyond from the 60s onward through the Renaissance Society, even though I had never been. I was just a great fan, so I was shocked that they called, and I moved to Chicago for a year, despite the fact that that was not practical for my life. And as you can imagine, I spent a lot of time going through archival boxes of artists who had very early, sometimes their first museum exhibition at the Ren, so many incredible artists. And I thought that those should be the archives that should go on public view, because people want to see handwritten notes from Felix Gonzalez Torres. It's amazing. And I'd never heard of Miyoko Ito, although she had the largest exhibition of her life in 1980 in Chicago, just 3 years before she died. So I saw this box, and it was right across the hall from where I had this office, but I never opened it. And I have a friend in the Bay Area named Stuart Pittman, who's a painter, and he was really excited I was going to Chicago, to where he grew up, and he said, "You should call my dad. He's a painter, John," who turns out to be a really great artist, who in the 70s and 80s showed with a gallery called Phyllis Kind, who showed Miyoko Ito. I didn't know that at the time. So I did a studio visit with John, and it was really exciting. And then we went back to his house, and that painting was over his couch. That's how it happened. It was one of those electrifying, sort of beyond words moments. I had no idea what it was. I couldn't place it at all. I was somewhat familiar with Chicago art history, but it seemed to sit just outside of it in a way that I didn't quite understand, but certainly related to the things that I knew. More elegant, more mysterious, more sensual. And of course, I asked him what it was, and he told me that it was Miyoko Ito, and this painting is called Island in the Sun, and it's from 1979, and that he had lent it to her Renaissance Society show. So he'd had the painting, maybe it's from 1978. He'd had the painting for longer than I've been alive, but he told me that he communes with it every morning. And the way that he addressed me and the work was with great pride, reverence. And I thought, well, if he is able to have as dynamic a relationship with this painting after owning it for as long as he has, then this really must be a serious situation. And so I started the research almost immediately, and I had been living in the Bay Area for many years, and I knew that I was going back to the Bay Area, and was startled to discover that she was born and raised in Berkeley. And so then I was really determined to try to find more paintings, but there's a great challenge in locating these paintings because whereas she has some family, even some in the Bay Area, there's no inventory, there's no archive, there's no basement or attic or something. All the works are out in the world, so it's not quite accurate to say she was hardly an unknown artist. She was an underknown artist, as are most artists in the universe. And so she sold paintings. Phyllis Kind sold her paintings in Chicago, and they're all spoken for. So she made a living, she made a career. The work just didn't get out of Chicago that often, which of course is the case for a number of Chicago artists and other artists who are understood as regional practitioners, which of course is problematic and strange. Anyway, so John put me in touch with a friend of his who had worked for Phyllis Kind, and she basically said, well, I can show you where the bodies are. And then when I thought that I was able to find sort of just enough, I wrote to Apsara de Quinzio, who's here, which is fantastic. Apsara was working at the Berkeley Art Museum at the time, and along with Larry Rinder, who was the director at the time, we all decided it would be a great idea to host a Matrix exhibition of this work. And Matrix is a really terrific series that's been going for many, many decades. That's almost sort of like a jewel box show. Sometimes it's a pivotal show in an artist's life, or it's a rediscovery show. And she was born and raised sort of right around the corner from the museum. And she went to Berkeley High, and she went to Cal, and she was an art major. And she was pulled out of school her senior year and thrown in an internment camp just south of San Francisco. There was a horse track called Tanforan, and then they gave it sort of a once-over and became a camp for thousands of Japanese Americans. It was really hey, Sarah. People didn't stay there for very long. It was sort of a clearinghouse to send folks further inland to these really punishing places in Nevada and elsewhere. And she married her sweetheart at Cal to ensure that they would go to the same camp. So her and Harry both went to Tanforan. She was there for a number of months. And then through the help of the Quakers, the Friends Society of America, she was allowed to go to graduate school, but not on the coast. Japanese Americans were not allowed to be on the coast, either coast of the United States at the time. And she went to Smith, but she discovered there that they didn't have an art program. So she left. And she went to the Art Institute of Chicago, where she did some graduate studies, but she didn't finish. She didn't graduate. So she has this great history in Berkeley, and then she makes a life and a career in Chicago. And with Apsara and Larry, we did this show, and it was in 2017. And Matrix 267, and I think there were a dozen paintings in the show. And at that time, I don't think I knew where many more paintings were, really. And they just opened this gorgeous building, and it was flooded with light, and it was just a really, really beautiful show. And this was an introduction for most audiences to Miyoko's work. And it mostly from the 1970s, but there were some works, like the one in the very back here, Kalamazoo, that's very late 50s. The work started bigger and the work started darker. And then, of course, I got to include Island in the Sun. Some paintings were in storage. Some paintings were in closets. Most paintings were hanging on the wall of people's homes. I mean, people who had been living with this work, for the most part, really, really valued this Ito work and were thrilled to lend to this exhibition, introduce the work to other people. For this show, I was primarily interested in getting enough work to tell some kind of a story about the development of the practice. And I was primarily interested in this form that emerges in a lot of the paintings, almost like a tombstone or a kind of bust. And John, who has Island in the Sun, is almost like a, sort of like a seer when it comes to this work. And he would talk to me at length about how he imagined that form as a kind of self-portrait. These are all Ito. Of course, they're all landscapes too, but they're all portraits. They're all self-portraits. They're all psychological portraits. They're many things at the same time, which is one reason, of course, why they're so intriguing. And then I heard from some curators at Artist Space in New York who said, why don't we bring a version of the show to Lower Manhattan? And so we did that, and it was largely the same show, but we swapped some things out. Excitingly, we found a number of paintings on the East Coast that we were able to put in the show, and that's the show that Matt saw. And a lot of artists saw. It was just amazing. The kind of visibility that it had and the kind of response that it got. And it was sort of right before Artist Space. They were under construction in this Cortlandt Alley architecture that they have now. And it was another space they were using around the corner on White Street that was just amazing. Really, really a lot of character in that space. So it was the kind of show that you could imagine Ito having anytime in the 60s or 70s, but she just didn't have. I discovered that people like Robert Storr had paintings of hers, Peter Doig. So it was exciting to know that I wasn't alone in this. And then by the front entrance, we had on a monitor an interview with her. It's a great organization in Chicago called the Video Data Bank, and they did a number of early video interviews, largely, not exclusively, with women artists. And it's the only source that I've found out there. It's the only time I've heard her voice. And she has a very idiosyncratic way of speaking. When she was really small, she moved to Japan from Berkeley for maybe 4 or 5 years. And she moved before she really learned to speak English. So she spoke Japanese, and then she came back. And her voice is unlike anything else I've ever heard. And I'll sort of end my presentation with a short clip of this video so you can hear her voice and more importantly, what she has to say. It's a really revealing interview. I mean, you don't hear video, you don't hear artists interview. You'll see what I'm talking about. Anyway, so I, through a stroke of amazing luck or chance, I had an opportunity to move to Chicago again, which was I had not anticipated. Just last year, a year and a half ago, and Matt had reached out to me before then at some point in the pandemic, and we knew each other. We weren't really close at that point, but we knew each other, and he reached out in a very kind way about another book project that I'd done about Bay Area artists, and I was really glad to hear from him, and he said, "Who's doing the Ito book?" And I mean, long story short, we ended this, hyperspeed text exchange, however many minutes later, with a feeling that we were going to do it together, and that Matt runs this great press pre-Echo, and we knew that the book would be a really heavy lift because you have to find the paintings, and then you have to photograph the paintings. And then, you got to make this book. So one reason why this book, of course, is so anomalous is because the only time you see really beautifully rendered 500-page books are for Ed Ruscha, for artists who have made it. And Ito hasn't, So the fact that Matt reached out and has taken on this project is an unbelievable gift, and it runs totally contrary to art history as we know it. So I'm forever grateful to Matt for taking this on. Yeah. So we decided to do this thing, and then I I called him and I was like, I'm moving to Chicago for this other thing, and it ended up being unbelievable because I just put up a flare, letting it be known that I was desperately trying to find these things, and they appeared because people know her, people know of her, people have the work, people know of a friend who has the paintings, whatever. So we worked to find as many as we thought we would find, and it was in the dozens and dozens, and we were thrilled. And then Matt came out to Chicago, and we sort of got it all started, and we hired a really talented veteran, art photographer, Jim Prince, and this was the kind of the first day of shooting. And these paintings, were most likely exhibited, but most likely exhibited only once at Phyllis's gallery for Chicago audience. And it was pretty surreal to walk into these homes and meet the owners of these things and get to know them and get to know their work. And every place was really different. These were two collectors who exclusively collect Japanese printmaking, except for Ito. And it was completely lovely. And these are two late paintings of hers in the early 80s, right before she died. She just thought things got horizontal and sort of more subdued. Anyway, this one I found on a tip from one of my former students at CCA. This is in her grandparents' bedroom, and it's called Rope Fetish. And they're lovely. This was a visit we made to a woman who has 5 and 2 works on paper. And that's a work she had in the bathroom. And then I like to show this only because I think it's important to note that I think Matt and I and Grant Schofield, who's the designer who made this beautiful thing happen, and Marnie Briggs, who was our invaluable production assistant, we're all, I think, fans more than anything else. We wanted to see as much of it as we could. None of us are trained as art historians, and I haven't been institutionally affiliated in a long time. So we just had to stand on a lot of couches. And make photo shoots happen in domestic settings. So this was a collection, unbelievably, in San Francisco that I didn't know about. We didn't know about until the very tail end of the project. And it was a family member of hers who has 3 amazing paintings and a number of really early works on paper we didn't know existed. And then, related to the art historical training sort of business, a number of the paintings that we found came to us untitled, and through finding old exhibition checklists and loan forms, we were able to deduce that many paintings we thought were entitled were actually titled. And a lot of the paintings came to us as no date, without a date, ND. We were able to date the paintings. Sometimes we weren't. And I don't know if you can see everybody here, but this is a painting called Sun Afire. And Matt, when we thought we weren't going to find any more paintings, Matt came to San Francisco. And I run a kind of project space called Cushion Works in a place where they actually make cushions, like they still make cushions. And on the 3rd floor, they have this unbelievably long table that they use to cut fabric. And we laid out all these images that Grant had prepared for us. And we had to do the work of dating a number of paintings. But we had like the most comprehensive picture to date of how the practice developed. And so we felt confident enough, for example, saying Sun of Fire is probably 1976. And it was really exciting, and it was really intimidating. And you also sort of realize that if we're not, we know more than anybody else. So why shouldn't we be dating paintings? Stranger things have happened. And we had found until that point, I didn't really have a clear picture of what we had done. Because it's all on the computer, or it's really piecemeal visiting these collectors. So we laid everything out, and then we had to get a ladder to see it. But that's the book, you know? And so that's her life, you know? That's her life in painting. And it was a challenge in a lot of ways, because I had been, you know, behind the scenes trying to write an essay about her life and the development of the practice. And whenever we would find sort of a new block of paintings, I had to re-edit the whole thing because we'd be learning more about her. A lot became more visible on that day. And, you know, as we've said before, when we've done these events in the past, you know, that was one of the great days, you know. And anyway, so we decided to print the book in Italy with a place called Trifolio in Verona, and they only produce art books, and their attention to detail is just amazing and staggering. And so we went there, and the process is really physical and intense, and I'd never been on press before, and it's a lot of standing and it's a lot of waiting, and ultimately you just have like this unbelievable amount of paper on one side of the room, and you print it, and then you just kind of like move it to the other side of the room, and in a funny way we could see the layout of the book in the sort of checkerboard format up there, and then, you know, huge stacks of paintings. The thing gets three-dimensionalized again in this strange way, and that's Massimo, our printer, holding the first, like the dummy of the book. And it just got, physically, the book got bigger and bigger. We didn't set out to do that, you know, we really didn't. We thought that this would be what we could find / greatest hits. Miyoko Ito, largely 70s. And not only did we find many more paintings than we anticipated, but they're all good, which doesn't really happen in the life of a painter. It shouldn't, maybe. But it was a thrill, and we decided to exclude 0 paintings. And whereas initially we were lukewarm on some of the earlier works, the sort of mid-century brackish grandparents' house palette, these paintings totally came alive for us. Not only because they told a story about who Ito would become, but because once we saw them in person, they were totally beautiful. So the book has 100 and something plates. It has this, and then at the end, you know, a number of people came forward. That sounds dramatic. A number of people reached out to me saying they had original slides from the Phyllis Kind era. So if a painting came into the gallery, it would have been documented. Not on view. I found very few exhibitions of installation images, except if it was an institution. And we decided to have a section in the back that were thumbnails of the slides that we were able to scan. And sometimes names and dates of paintings were written on the slides. Sometimes they weren't. Sometimes we could tell by a checklist from 1970 what the name of a painting was, even though we couldn't locate it. So there are many pages in the back here of paintings that existed and theoretically still exist. We just don't know where they are. So we were hopeful that the book would generate energy and enthusiasm, and that maybe more paintings would surface. And since we published it, I think we found, I don't know, 15? Something like that, from all stages of her career. So that's incredible. And it's on the second printing. Of course, our fantasy is to do a second edition that includes all these additional works and maybe a retrospective too. And then that interview from 1978 was transcribed and reproduced a year after her death in this sort of zine-looking thing that Video Databank was in the habit of publishing called Profile. And we included that. I mean, we extracted the text, we made it a little more legible, and then showed images from what that publication looks like. And then we showed various installation images that we found. This is from the Hyde Park Arts Center. And of course, we can't know who decided to hang the show that way. But that happened. And the pictures were, really, really exciting. That was one of the checklists that was crucial. That was crucial for us. And even some of these paintings have surfaced since publication. And then the Renaissance Society has these gorgeous black and white photographs of the show in 1980 that was called a review. So it's not a colossal space, the Renaissance Society, but they proposed the show as a kind of retrospective. And there's Island in the Sun in that show. And it was neat to be in Chicago at the time because find the original loan forms that John submitted, things like that. And then through the Renaissance Society and various other organizations and people, we found a lot of ephemera, which was exciting. So this is a letter that she wrote. I was just trying to get a residency to really focus on her paintings. Great postcards. You can see that she was presented alongside other Chicago artists. I should say that that she was the first living artist that Phyllis Kind showed, and a lot of other Chicago artists that you might know about, like Jim Nutt or Gladys Nilsson, Barbara Rossi, they were all inspired to show with Phyllis because she was showing Ito. She was a generation older than them, and they totally idolized her. She was included in the 1975 Whitney Biennial, and she's in this catalog. Phyllis Kind Gallery holiday card, and she's in there. Fantastic. More postcards. She was a big traveler, and she would share a lot of postcards. The Renaissance Society shared these images, a big banner of the review in the quad at the University of Chicago, postcard, newspaper, advertisement, and then perhaps most touchingly in the Renaissance Society archive, there's a very legendary director and curator there named Suzanne Guez, worked there for about 40 years, who organized this show and many, many others. And in the archive, there's this really beautiful origami letter that Ito wrote to Suzanne. And I couldn't really tell if it had ever been opened, but I certainly wasn't going to try for fear that I wouldn't be able to put it back together. And a little piece of dried grass in it. And a number of letters, and she stamped a lot of them at the bottom, either with a fly or a little paw, like a doggy paw print. That was her. And there she is. She lived in Hyde Park with her husband, who was a successful toy importer, and she always worked at home. And she actually worked with the architect of the Renaissance Society, John Vinci, just a few years before she died, to design like the perfect painting studio at home, which she wasn't able to use for very long. And then we also compiled a CV of hers, which with an editor that we worked with, Jennifer Krasinski, who's a great writer, spent a lot of time in Los Angeles. And Jennifer and I have joked that we will go to heaven for our efforts here in doing this work. So she showed a lot, she showed a lot. And then we decided to keep the writing in the book limited to her voice and to me, but my job was fairly straightforward. I felt like I just had to tell the story of her life and track and trace the development of the work, but it's nothing that's too showy. And we also we became aware at some point that we wanted to leave room for an institution, potentially, to make their own book. And to hire their own writers and curators and scholars and academics to populate the pages of their retrospective catalog that they should make. So, this is, I'll just walk you quickly through this essay. Sort of the earliest work when she's in Chicago, when she's in Berkeley, up on the left. She studied watercolor. Watercolor was absolutely the name of the game. When she was at Cal, you had to watercolor. And they practiced what they called synthetic cubism. And these are early experiments in synthetic cubism. Next to it are photographs by the great Dorothea Lange, who was hired by the government to photograph life at Tanforan, although not permitted to make those photographs public for many, many decades after. Early European-inspired still life painting when she gets to Chicago. Open windows. Up on the top left, I think it's 1950, some of the earliest experiments in oil. So you can see that forms are still, legible and delineated. They just get increasingly abstract through the course of the career. She also experimented a lot with lithography and with crank lithography. And she said that learning tonal values between black and white was really incredibly important in the development of her life and thinking as a painter. The bottom right is a painting by her friend Evelyn Statsinger, who is chronically underknown. She began paintings as drawings, and she left a number of gaps in between the color forms and the paintings, and you can see the pencil marks. And in some cases, you can see the red and the green that she used as underpainting, but she really said that the drawing was the difficult part. In terms of locating the painting within it. And then she just went to work on the painting. That's a Bonnard from the collection of the Art Institute of Chicago. She talks about being pretty electrified by encountering these works that she'd never seen before in such an incredible institution. And this early work, Kalamazoo. And then she sort of gets cooking mid to late 60s. That form emerges that I was talking about earlier. And then up on the top left is Forrest Bess, the great visionary painter Forrest Bess. Helen Frankenthaler. I feel like it's important to contextualize these works to a certain extent within the history of post-war American art. And then I think that she belongs in that visionary context. Top right, she talked about how when she went to McDowell Colony, she did residencies there like 8 times. And apparently there was furniture hanging around the place, and she would set up these tableaus, and that was the basis for a lot of work in the 70s. And you can see sort of chairs and receding spaces and almost like a model that she's working from. She'll talk about how she came to know of the Heian period in Japanese art in this little clip that I'll show you, and then a painting of hers on the top right next to a Paul Klee, who she really valued, although I've found a letter in the archive saying that as much as she loves Paul Klee, he's cosmic and I'm earthbound. A few more works, and then I should address, and maybe you have noticed, on a number of paintings there are these half-driven tacks around the perimeter, and if you see the work in person, you can't hide from it. It's very strange, and it's a little bit violent. And it's very beautiful, and it's particular. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what that was about. She was an artist who, again in the video, you'll hear her say that content is pointed out to me by other people. In that way, she's really at odds with like present tense art historical moment, I think. And apparently, at Phyllis Kind, at some point had like renovated their storage space for the paintings, and they had carpeted this area, and the nails were getting stuck when they were moving the paintings around. And they called her and they said, Mio, her nickname was Mio, what do you want us to do? We're pulling up the rug here, moving your paintings around. And she said, don't worry about it, just hammer them in. unfulfilling and strange. But I don't really think. I mean, she may have had that disposition at that moment, but it would have been really easy to just keep the hammer swinging, you know. So I felt like I couldn't say what it meant. I guess I could say what I thought, but I think to a certain extent it's open to interpretation. But I included this image here on the bottom right. There was another Cal Berkeley artist who was also imprisoned in this concentration camp named Mineo Kubo, who wrote a graphic novel that I highly recommend. And of all the information that I took in about Tanforan, it was by far the richest account of what life was actually like there. And it's called Citizen 13660. And she talks about arriving with her family to this horse track and these horse stalls, and how she moves in, and that's what it looks like. And she talks about how there are these half-driven nails all over the surface of the place, and they would hang horse tools and things on them. So of course I can't say that's why Miyoko did that. I can just say, well, I've never seen that before, and I felt like maybe it was important or interesting to include that. Okay, so now I'm just gonna play a few minutes of this video, and then we'll hear from our speakers. Thanks for hanging with me. I think I talked too long.
How would you describe the content of your paintings? What do you hope people see from them?
Well, content are usually pointed out to me by other people. Like one day, Rei Yoshida said, "Oh, Mio, you're very much into Heian period in Japan." And so it is. And I recognize that way. And I went through a period of doing furniture. Or there were mirror periods. Well, that's typically surrealist. I think that happened in MacDowell. MacDowell has a lot of old furniture, Victorian furniture. But then furniture never stay furniture. They turn into landscape, or they turn into some kind of action. And so often people say my paintings are act of creation. And they are. I'm very conscious of that. Conscious and unconscious. In a way, I'm growing all the time. And also, each new painting seems like beginning of a painting too at the same time. All those years of painting, yet each painting is a beginning again, all over again, which is so wonderful.
What would you say about your paintings gives you the greatest sense of accomplishment?
It's very much a part of my life, like breathing, and it's a necessity. It's do or die. And I do have a great deal of marital problems. Every time I have a problem, that is a problem, but I go deeper and deeper into it. I have no place to take myself except painting. I have 2 children. My daughter's been very, very close to me, but there's a time of departure too. It's only fair that she departs, not altogether. But painting will stay with me always. It's been my biggest life-giving force.
Thank you, Jordan. Tremendous, tremendous work. Okay. All right, Matt Connors, Thank you, Matt, also. It was tremendous.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks, ICA and Wendy and Jordan, everyone. And, sorry. It is, so we're a small press, really small. It's just me, really, and, and this book was made with really 3 people, like 4 people, and I'm just, like, Wendy is such a big, like, person for me in my life and about small press and books, and it's just it's like kind of exciting that this is the venue for this. And yeah, the small press world just took a big hit with one of the distributors just closed out of the blue, and like a lot of people in the landscape are like really hurting, and it's kind of like it's kind of weird that we did this, and it's like a real book, and I don't think we thought we were going to make a real book, so we're having to do all these real things that we didn't know we were going to do. Like, for example, when I went to Chicago, I walked into this house that we were working on with this woman who's like kind of the estate, and she runs into the room and comes back and gives me a big pile of slides, which I then lost during that day that we were walking around. I got back to the hotel and I was like, oh, I'm gonna just relax for a bit. And then I like stood up and I was like, where the fuck are those slides? And I'd been carrying them around with me all day. And we had only stopped at one place, that funny house on this Mies van der Rohe apartment where those 2 things were, that was home to these 2 very fussy gay guys that like wouldn't let us touch anything. So I knew that they had to be there, but I was like losing my mind. So just an example of like the way this project went and how it was kind of like spitballed a little bit. And the slides were found where they should be, and they came back, and yeah. So, and I, as a painter and artist, I kind of resist words and language putting on top of my work, and I don't really want to do it onto other people's work. So while I recently curated a show in London, and a person who's a big part of our effort owns this incredible painting, and he had lent it to a collection in London, and this painting was in London, so I was able to borrow it. And I hadn't seen it. I'm gonna forward to it. Yeah, I had never seen it with my eyes, and when I got to Goldsmiths, where the show was, I was supposed to be doing all these other things, but I basically ran up to the room where that painting was because I'd never seen it. And it's an older painting, and we were kind of like, the older paintings, like they kind of look like 50s paintings, but this thing happened where we were like, fuck, these are insane paintings, they're really beautiful. And like just in making the book, we really could just see, you can really see how the paintings are made, and then like, not to speak of standing in front of the painting. So this painting is just like insane in person. Like so I chose this painting to talk about last time I did this because I had been looking at it for a week. So I'm going to talk about it again now because it's very rare to see these paintings. And while I was thinking about this, I was reading a book of another small press that's very dear to my heart called The Song Cave, which is a poetry press also run by 2 people. And I found this poem that I would kind of just read this poem and be done with it by an artist named Ronald Johnson. It's from his first book called A Line of Poetry, A Row of Trees. It's from around the same time as this painting. And I'll read it. Nebula, whirlpool, mist and cloud, knotted asymmetrical branchings formed like a labyrinth, our form, even as a sphere, crystal, and flower. Patterns are temporary boundaries, the moving countries where nothing is seen in isolation. And Orpheus, the metamorphosis before us of coral, acanthus, leopard's paw, bird's foot, sinuosities of meadow and of rock as it moves quietly beneath lichen. For where the figure is, the answer is. Newton, it is said, did not show the cause of an apple falling, only the similitude between the apple and the stars. So that poem felt really like apt, and I would stop right there. But I would also just say, I want to go to bat for the early paintings, because the phrase that Jordan used when describing the like kind of hot paintings that she got cooking, I think those paintings kind of eclipse the rest of her work. And because we don't get to see them very often, these early ones kind of fade back into like quote unquote early work. But they're kind of laying the ground rules for the whole rest of the game. And like all of the rules, all of like the gravity, the laws, I have come to think of her as like a rules-based painter. And she's, with the initial drawing, she's like setting up the rules, and then the game is on. And that is really, really apparent in this early work. And the color is there. It doesn't seem like it's there like it is in the work where it's like really hot orange and pink. But these paintings are you know, they're really creating the whole script for the rest of her life. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks, everyone. Pearl, you're up. So you just have to advance the arrow, or I'll do it.
Oh, wow. This is so different. Okay. Okay, interesting. This painting looks a little different in the book, or maybe in the bad lighting of my studio or something. This is really exciting. Before I read this, I wanted to mention when I had encountered her paintings in 2017 at the BAMPFA show, or at the Berkeley Art Museum and Film Archive. I had gone to see the Martin Wong show and then stumbled across her works in the other room. And I was at first really skeptical. I was like shocked. I thought it was like a young person making these like really cool and totally with it, like hip paintings that were really intense and serious and compelling and meaningful. Like I believed them, and I was like, you know, I don't know why. So sour. But then, you know, walking around the room and being really mesmerized by them and being in their insistence, like not only how the paint is like attached to the surface, but by the forms and the repetitions, but also how they just really elude any kind of, you know, you see the landscape, you see the figurative, you see the architectural, and it just how elusive they all were was so familiar, or something I recognized about not, you know, like making work that you want to unfold and resist being named or cornered or defined. And so this is really exciting that you made this book. Okay. So for this, it was really hard to choose a painting, one work. And so I'm going to read a poem I wrote titled Irrigation Dedication, an erotic fan fiction. I am caught in your gaze, your stare, a big ol' small round sunny glare, which slides across the surface into a wink, a side-eyed, fleshy, sleepy blink that puckers, purses, sucks or slurps, a straw, a stick, a noodle, a wafer of thin air. I follow you to the door. We open it, the gate, the lid, the roof. into the cabin, the house, a field, an August view. It's empty and spacious, undulant, strong with haze, gas, wavy air plump with rising vapors, a canopy of umami stench and honey aroma tickles the atmosphere that flickers with smoke, with steam, and throbs from the heat of mine and yours as meat. Our matter gets fatter. I feel it in our humps. My dough rises, your bread wrinkles. Pressure from below bubbles up top. Its thin crust inhales, exhales, presses up against the windowsill. The bottom of that pain, your fleshy fluting, reaches for the ceiling, thinking of the sky, the frame, maybe the next dimension. We hit something green, no blue, no sea foam, no smog. It's midday, maybe morning, probably sunset when we emerge. We're suns now. Some of us are still young and hot. Some of us are desaturated hamburger buns. Then we fall. We slide between the horizon and your scalp, in that zone pinching closed, where curtains become blinds making crescent shadows on the wall. Now a pocket, a vent. No, a balcony for our friend, the wisest lozenge, lucky whisker and all. Hot dog, baby dowel, tongue depressor has the best view to our wordless encounter. Beige, caramel, olive, teal, tangerine and rust flow edge to edge and turn calculated corners, pumping and piping the whole scene endeavor. Up and down, front and to back, we shoot and ladder our time together. So we settle somewhat in the not quite bottom third, resting on this beam, this bar, spreading across this ray forever. Dynamite, or is it a drain, a release valve that holds another little sun? It suggests we slide down your torso for a warmed, cool ending that drops us back down to earth, slipping, seeping, drifting into a wildfire sunset. Unless we catch this latest curve, cupped by its belly, lured as thirsty fish once more by the hair, by the line, upstream into another peekaboo rendezvous, promised by this tiny portico, we sneak away to fool around and find peace, pleasure, and tabled presence inside one last portal. Thank you.
Hanna Hur.
Sun of Fire, 38 by 30 inches, oil on canvas, no date, but maybe 1976. A sun rising and setting at the same time, suspended in its own red light. A stick pulls it downward and pushes it upward. Who is holding this tool? The thing I connect with immediately in Miyoko Ito's work is the presence of line and how this centers her paintings within a practice of drawing. Ito's work speaks through the aesthetic and emotional registers of drawing. Drawing is intimate, direct, the visible hand, vulnerable. When studying her lines in Sun of Fire, I feel I am with her. Traveling backwards through time, I become her hand. We draw the line together. Drawing gives this to me, an imagined merging with the author. There's an enormous surplus of painting right now. What do we expect from painting? I seek refuge in paintings that bear the necessary image. an image that does not aim to explain or clarify itself. It withholds some. It gives almost not enough to pique interest. By doing so, it trusts itself and the viewer. It offers me space to come toward it on my own volition without any need for seduction. And when I look at a necessary image, I'm not thinking anymore. I'm utterly seeing. What a relief to simply experience visual phenomena. Son of Fire feels this way to me. I don't have many thoughts when I look at it. It quietly opens an interior door to the color red. Red is libidinous. Red is the animating force inside all of life. Red is repressed desire. Red ruptures all that is repressed. Red is pathos. Red is transgression. Red is the regrettable action. Red is rebellion. Red is sin. Red is release. The subconscious thinks in red. Red is Mars, the god of war. Red is violent. Red is the martyr. Red is the hero. Red is a primary symbol. Red is the earth's core. Red burns. Red is ancient. Red is cave painting. Red is primal. Red is the inside of a body. Red wants. Red is rapture. Red is possessive. Red is possession. Red is the ecstatic one. Red is Pentecost, the fiery tongues that descended upon the apostles when they received the Holy Spirit. Red is the Christ. Red is demonic. Red is Hades. Red is belief. Red is wrath. It's not lost on me that Ito was forced into an internment camp when I look at her work. A hazy color palette might reflect the quality of light in California. It might also reflect a psychic burial. Why is Ito's red in Son of Fire muted? My favorite color of flash paint is bright red, and it's called Oriental Red. Red is rage. Red is a knife. Red burns karma away. Red is insatiable desire. Red is excessive lust. Red is revenge. Red is shame. Red is a fever dream. Red is the precursor to black, to the void. Red is an omen. Red is a warning. Red is a wailing siren. Red is the color of the single catastrophe that keeps piling wreckage and is hurled at the feet of the angel of history. Red is the storm in the wings of the angel of history that irresistibly propels him into the future. Red destroys. Pulling the tower brings red. Red is the inferno. Red is volcanic. Everything below surfaces in time. One day he turned a page in his book only to find that the next page was all in red. No language appeared on the red page, just a full sheet of red. Red page tore itself from his book spine and shape-shifted into a small red disc, a communion wafer. It flung itself into his mouth, pushing his lips open by the sheer force of its own energy propelling itself at him. His spirit left him at once. He became a body in totality. Engorged with blood, skin reddened, he felt to be a devilish god. Red is orifice. Red is the mouth. Red is the erotics of cannibalism. Red is lovers separating. Red is a succubus. Red enjoys itself. It is pleased by its own power. Red is physical. Red is earthbound. Red laughs at the ethereal. Red is all heart, no head. Red does not think. Red is a horse rearing. Red is a sun burning. Our sun is about halfway through its life. Some 5 billion years from now, it will evolve into a bloated red giant, devouring Venus and Mars and scorching the earth. Sign of Fire. Thanks.
Rebecca Morris. Do you want the other one first? Yeah, okay. So
Hi. Miyoko Ito is an artist I have been aware of for a little while now. Having gone to the art school at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where she also went, we had some commonalities. Many of my professors, Barbara Rossi, Ray Yoshida, Jim Nutt, Frank Piatek, Don Baum, and Phil Hansen were her peers. And her work would come up from time to time, back then in the 1990s. And the only way we knew how to see it then, pre-internet and pre this incredible book, was from her black and white Renaissance Society catalog, which was out of print and scarce. This is one thing that she and I share, a connection to Suzanne Ghez, who curated both her and my exhibitions at the Ren, which were both survey shows. Hers was in 1980 and mine was in 2005, 25 years apart, which speaks very much to Suzanne's incredible length of time as a curator. I also attended Smith College like Ito did, and family on my father's side was interred. Harold and Kimiko Kozaki at Heart Mountain, Wyoming, Ito at Tan Fran in California. This painting, Sea Watch, 1957, I had the chance to see this painting at a painter friend's house nearly 9 years ago to the date in April 2016. I went back in my email and I see it was on April 20th. I'm not sure if my friend and I had ever really discussed her work, but from one painter to another, he reached out. I pretty much got in my car right away and drove over. It was fascinating. I'd only seen a few of her works in real life, and this one was so early. The color was kind of consistent with what you imagine color from that time to be in the 50s, and her language was under formation, meaning in formation. Her signature calibrations of scale, spatial oddity, color, and form were not totally dialed in yet. I learned that she kept the color quiet during this period at the recommendation of a peer who remarked that this made sense as her paintings themselves were quiet. I love seeing the work of an artist before they hit their stride, before they hit their high style. You can see the searching and the thinking, the beginning of a chain reaction of choices. This painting has so many of those parts to it. This is Untitled 127 from 1972. Abstraction is an incredible language. It can accurately articulate the in-betweenness and keep those ideas complicated and nuanced. It can be a language, a mode of operation for artists who seek a private subjectivity. Ito's titles like Pyramid of Silence, Layered Presence, Exterior In, lean into these desires. She liked the suggestive. Sometimes I think that the quirkier the painting, the more odd its forms, its colors, its marks, the easier it is to enter that painting. The what is this? The strangenesses are a form of catnip, at least for me, and I think for many of her fans too. She was so inventive. Brown. The brown seems like some kind of built environment in this painting, or perhaps it's the earth going down, a gradient of depth. There's a kind of cubist space in this brown. I know that she was interested in synthetic cubism, and the horizontals literally represent flatness, but then this diagonally thin box lays across on top of it. It feels like someone just kicked out a window jamb. The teal at the top is possibly the sky, with some yellow alluding to a light source in the center. There are rules here, but then she breaks them, because what fun are rules unless you get to make them and break them yourself? This is one of the greatest joys of being a painter. I'm thinking the rules are no curves, only right edges and sharp corners, until suddenly there are 3 curves. Are they tabby toes, which is also described in the essay in the book? Fingers, logs? What is the hollowed out space at the bottom? Some kind of strange compartment, a basement, a crawl space, a storage box, a drawer space with the drawer pulled out and missing? It looks like you can climb into it and go left. And just when you think you're getting overwhelmed by this massive brown, however you decide what it is, the little gaps in the paint where the pencil lines were marked out around it open up the painting. Maybe all of this brown is quite flimsy. Her ideas of structural abstraction and furniture into landscape seem at play in this painting to me. A lot of her paintings like this one feel kind of inside-outside, window forms, apertures, peekaboo holes. I want to end by thinking about this strange little quirky thing at the top of the painting. What is it? Is it a little feather? It makes me think of the kind of feather that goes on a cap, or someone with a high ponytail running behind the wall and flapping it in the wind. Or maybe it's just 4 little fingers curling up over the top. It's a garnish, a little flourish of delight that harkens so many future idiosyncratic moves and forms in her later work. Thank you.
And Lesley Vance.
So I'm going to mainly, oops, okay. Microphone. First, I wanted to thank you, Matt and Jordan, for bringing this amazing book into the world. I really hope it helps get Miyoko Ito's work shown in more public institutions, which I am certain it will, it must, and so you've done a great public service because it's got to happen. I wanted to just show quickly, before I talked about my chosen painting, this is a photo of me that Matt took at the Matthew Marks show last year, 2023. Many more people need to have the opportunity to see them in real life. I've been a fan for many years, but had seen so few until I was finally in New York last year when Matthew Marks had the show. And to see them in person adds so much to the experience of them. The scale to the body and the thickness of the paint. You really do feel them in a new way. Your senses pick up the greens and reds in the underpainting, an occasional mark of graphite, and that vibration of the underpainting against her orange and turquoise hues charges everything with energy. You can feel the horizontal strokes, the brush strokes in your body. The rigor of her, I should have a detail, but her really repetitive application of these little horizontal marks of paint. And looking at them in person really affects, your relationship to the images when you see them now. When I go to look at art, as anyone who has ever been with me at a museum knows, I use my phone sort of as a sketchbook, and I take 1 million photos to remember colors, forms, textures, various things in the paintings. And when I look back to find photos from the show at Matthew Marks, there are none. I was so 100% present in front of these paintings that it didn't occur to me to take photos. There's no point in taking photos of magic. It's not possible to capture, which is perhaps not something to point out at a catalog launch full of very generously beautifully photographed paintings, which I am really grateful for. But still, it needs to be pointed out that seeing a work in person should be a wholly different experience from seeing it in images. I can't put it any better than Charlene Van Heil does in her conversation with Gary Garrels from the Oranges and Sardines 2008 catalog from the Hammer Show. She said, "It is about the feeling that a painting or any work of art can give when you can't stop looking because there's something that you want to find out, that you want to understand. Good paintings have this tantalizing quality. And once you turn around, you absolutely cannot recapture them. They leave a hole in the mind, a longing." So Matt asked us to speak about a painting, and I didn't think too hard about it. It's the work that I hate having to close the book on, that leaves a hole in my mind and my heart every time I have to put it away and get on with my day. It's this one, Euphoria, from 1966. Yes, the colors are different up here. It's a bit of an outlier in that it's like a very strange singular image in the middle of the canvas. It's like a real thing, an object in space, an object that contains space. When I see it, I have a feeling of like flowing hair. It's something human, animal, or of another world altogether. Could be inside the body or outside. The light brown opening, is it light brown in this picture? It's kind of more golden yellow in this image. It's like pressing against the braid, but it's also like an opening, a portal, and the braid is tumbling out of it freely at the same time that this same shape that's maybe a portal is like pushing it down and holding it there. That spatial confusion creates visual and cognitive slippage. Her play with space here reminds me of Magritte, whom I love. And we heard this already tonight in the interview, but I love what Ito says in the interview when she mentions kind of surrealist qualities turning up in her work while being on a residency at MacDowell. And she says, "MacDowell has a lot of old furniture, Victorian furniture, but then furniture never stays furniture. It turns into landscape or into some kind of action. And often people say my paintings are an act of creation. And they are. I'm very conscious of that, conscious and unconscious. There's so much pleasure lost in our world full of reasonable and logical depictions of space. The ambiguity, the mystery, the strangeness in this painting's depiction of space brings me so much joy. The gravity is undefined, the thing is hovering there. Or maybe it's not hovering because it's like an opening into a new space. For as horizontal as her marks are and as vertical and diagonal as her lines frequently are, I always feel the strongest movement within her paintings is circular. I remain inside the painting. The energy is internal. The power is inside of it. Paintings often exist in this collision of opposites, and that is certainly true in Ito's paintings. They are planar and circular, still but in motion. Line defines space. Space defines line. Background becomes foreground. What is interior? What is exterior? Abstraction and representation blur together. They're graphic, but extraordinarily painterly, matte, but shiny, smooth as velvet, but these are textured, layered works. They're meditative and really funny, cool and warm, distant, but intimate. The imagery is from the future, the present, and the past. Her work suspends time in a way specific to painting itself. I don't think anyone's paintings convey time like Miyoko Ito's. There's both the feeling that this image is all there is, there's no before or after, there's only right here, right now, but the paintings often also open up portals, entry points into expanses of watery blues and turquoise to lose yourself in a pure sensory experience. There's also the feeling that the scene behind the picture is different from what is visible. And there's the feeling that the image painted had a before and has an after, that this painting is a momentary pause, this image is a momentary pause, and so the painting contains infinite time. I want to end with a quote from Philip Guston that I have taped to my studio desk that describes one way he desired his painted images to be held on the canvas. He says, "It comes to rest momentarily, just momentarily. That is to say that it must feel as if it could go somewhere else. It's just pausing, which is, of course, the promise of continuity. It means not death. It means promise of continuation of life.
That was incredible. One after the other. Matt and I had an idea early on to collect these observations, these thoughts into like a. We didn't want to tell you this because we didn't want to make you nervous. Into like an Ito reader sort of a thing later, and that, I mean, I can't tell you how meaningful it is for you to be in dialogue with her work. It's really amazing. So thanks. I know it's a long event, so I don't want to keep folks longer than they want to be here. If anyone has any questions for me or for these amazing artists, happy to take some. And if you need to go, I totally understand.
We have a microphone for questions, so everyone can hear. No? We're wrapped.
Okay.
Well,
Thanks,
thank
Oscar.
you. I meant wrapped, R-A-P-T, but we are also wrapping. Thank you, Rebecca, Hannah, Pearl, Lesley, Matt, Jordan, Miyoko. This has been a wonderful evening. And we're going to strike this event, but we're opening up the show if anybody would like to spend about 30 minutes in Scratching at the Moon, which is a wonderful show, and or hang out and mingle. Thank you. And buy books. Buy books. Thank you. Support independent publishing.
Thanks, Oscar.